Miss Martha's collection feature is a gorgeous purple silk dress from the mid-1800s. Martha was the final keeper of a collection of garments collected by her family members that spanned back generations to the 1850s. I believe this one may have been possibly worn by her great-grandmother, Martha, born in 1837. I guess Martha's mother used to have a sewing lady named Miss Hemish that they would take these dresses out of trunks and kind of rework them and remake them for various events. And I believe this was one such example. I'm guessing that the original bodice, having it been silk, probably just disintegrated over time. And so my guess is that they removed that silk and tried to kind of just take different scraps and kind of make a makeshift bodice, because the skirt is in really amazing condition. So here we have a little peek at the inside. It is lined in cotton. There's 2 darts in it that do have bones in them. And then you can see evidence of stitching, a curved stitching, which was quite common for mid-1800 dresses, as that drew the eye towards the waist, making it look even smaller. And there's a little dart in the back there, and a combination of hand stitching and machine stitching. And there's an hook and eye closure, which that little flap is actually going to go back over those hooks. So that's how the bodice looked to begin with. So my plan is to revert it back to the original as much as possible. And I want to make a jacket to see how it may have looked originally. So first step, took the silk sleeves off. They were not usable. The silk was tattered. And now the original shell is back to how it was. So you can see the sloped shoulders with the seam towards the back. Again, this points towards the mid-1800s. And I want to make a jacket for it. Why? Because I'm curious. I just wanted to see what it would look like. So I found some yards at a fabric warehouse near me, and it's not quite the right shade. I wanted a little bit darker, and I had this dye on hand, which can be used on silk, and it will do a 1/2 pound of dye, which this was just under that. So before dyeing, I'm going to use some Synthropol, which again I had on hand, and that just is kind of something to remove any finishes and whatnot, which makes the fabric more readily accept the dyeing process. So to do this, you have to add a 1/2 cup of salt to the water, and you have to dissolve the dye in 4 cups of hot water. And I'm not going to dye the silk in hot water because that's going to be too hard on it, but you have to dissolve the dye in hot water. And then I added it to that salt water. The temperature is 84 degrees Fahrenheit, which 85 is about the max. So I'm at the right temperature for this project. So for the first 15 minutes, the directions say to just move it around for 15 minutes. And then after that, about every so often, like say every 5 minutes over the course of the next 45 minutes, you move it around. So it's in the dye bath for a total of an hour. And I maintained the temperature on a low setting on the stove. So then you have to rinse, rinse, rinse. And there's some blue coming out, so we're getting closer. And then after it runs clear, then I washed it with some baby shampoo, and you're getting the rest of the residue out, and then you do more rinsing. So it does look like it did dye it just a little bit darker, but I won't know till the morning to see if it turned out or not. And yes, it did. It took the dye just enough that I'm happy with it. So here are the patterns that I ended up creating to make the jacket. And I don't know how to make a pattern. I am in awe of people that know how to do this, but I muddled my way through it. And I don't know, it worked out. I used some black fabric that was kind of in the bargain bin at that fabric warehouse as a backing for each of the pieces to kind of flatline them. And then the sleeve facing, I did a little bit of the silk just so that if you see a little peak, you're not going to see the black. So there's the shape of those sleeves, which I think is a really neat, unique sleeve shape. And just did the stitching one by one. There's not too many pieces. And again, it's flatlined, so it wasn't too terribly hard for the construction. And then this silk presses so nicely. I had some antique beaded trim from my stash that I've been saving for a special project, and I thought this was special, so on it went. So with the skirt, as I said, it was in really good condition, but it does look like they tried to make the waist a little bit bigger. So the two areas of the skirt waistband had been cut. So then I took a little bit of fabric from the facing and replaced a little patch in those. And then here are what is called cartridge pleats. So think of like a pleated cartridge, like a filter. This is that type of pleating for these skirts where they took huge amounts of fabric to get them down, pleat them down to accommodate the small waists. And as I'm doing this, I am just marveling, thinking of the person who did this 150 years ago, and without even electricity and just all these tiny stitches. And it's just incredible to me. And I just kept thinking of the person who made this so many years ago. And here I am 150 years later working on it. Anyway, it just was really touching. And here's a little better shot at those pleats, which again, I think are amazing. So here's an inside of the skirt, and there is a pocket. That's a fun discovery. It's kind of a unique pleated shape to it, and it's a combination of hand stitching and machine stitching, and it's tethered, more kind of secured to the waist there. And the whole dress is lined in like a cotton or linen or perhaps a combination. And there's an extra little band at the bottom, and it's bound in a wool binding. So from where they started to where we ended up, and again, we don't know what it looked like, but it's so fun to imagine. Maybe it did look like this, and maybe who knows what it was worn for, but with this color, I think it's just incredible. I hope that Martha and Miss Hamish would be happy with how it turned out. It was fun to work on. Thanks for watching.